Hi everyone. So let me first introduce myself. I am Drishti. I'm a software engineer at Google and I work in Google Cloud in the technical infrastructure domain. Before joining Google, I did a couple of internships, one at Amazon in the Amazon Pay team and the second one in Oracle in the data science team. And I graduated from BITS Pilani. I also hold a minor in data science. Okay, so we are going to start the course on data analytics and data science. And today we are going to talk about Python. We are going to understand the basics of Python and also get started with coding in Python. Okay, so let's start. First of all, what is Python? Python is a high level, general purpose, and a very popular programming language. So it's a high level language like other languages that you already know of, like C, Java. It's a high level language. And Python is used in lots and lots of applications. It's used in web development, machine learning, in the software industry. All the companies, they have code written in Python in some projects. Or stop it. Hi everyone. So let's get started with the course on data analytics and data science. I'll be the instructor, and let me first introduce myself. I'm Drishti. I am a software engineer at Google, and before stop it. Hey everyone. So let's get started with the course on data analytics and data science. Let me first introduce myself. I am Drishti. I'm a software engineer at Google and I work in Google Cloud in the technical infrastructure domain. Before joining Google, I did a couple of internships, one at Oracle in the data science team and the second one in Amazon in the Amazon Pay team. I graduated from BITS Pilani and I also hold a minor in data science. So let's get started with the class today. Today we are going to study Python. We're going to start from scratch, understand what Python is, understand the properties of Python, and then move to coding in Python. So let's get started. So Python is a high level language and it is used in lots and lots of applications like web development, machine learning, and so on. And we are going to use Python for machine learning specifically. So talking about the advantages of Python. So Python is currently the most widely used multi-purpose high-level programming language. As we already discussed, it's used in lots and lots of places. It's used in web development, app development, machine learning, and so on. Python follows object-oriented and procedural paradigms. I hope you already know what is the difference between object-oriented and procedural paradigms. Here, the basic units are objects, whereas here in procedural, the basic units are function. Python programs generally are smaller than other programming languages, for example, Java. So the code that you write in Python is going to be smaller. Programmers have to type relatively less, the code is smaller, you can perform the same task with less lines of code. And here in Python, indentation is required. And because of indentation, things are more readable. Python language is being used by almost all the tech giant companies. So almost all the companies are using Python in some way or the other. So Google, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, Dropbox, Uber, etc. Everyone is using Python. The biggest strength of Python is huge collection of standard library which can be used. So Python has libraries. For example, in this course, we are going to learn about sklearn. Sklearn is a standard library that Python has, which helps us to build models. So for everything in Python, there is a standard library which can be used to make things easier and to write less code. Okay, so the reasons for increasing popularity, some we have already discussed. Emphasis on code readability because there are indentations. We have shorter codes. Ease of writing, programmers can express logical concepts in fewer lines of code. So the codes are smaller. To perform the same task, C++ or Java would take more lines as compared to Python. Python supports multiple programming paradigms like object-oriented programming, procedural programming, and so on. There exist inbuilt functions for almost all of the frequently used concepts. And one I already told you, to build models, we have sklearn. So the philosophy of Python is simplicity is the best. Okay, let's talk about a couple of language features of the features of Python. So Python is an interpreted language. What does a compiler or an interpreter mean? Basically, both of them are translators which convert the high level language into low level language. The difference lies in the way how they do this translation. In compiler, the compiler scans the whole program in one go. So the entire program will be scanned in one go, whereas in interpreter, the translation would happen line by line, one statement at a time. So compiler scans the code in one go, so whatever errors are there in the entire code, they are shown together at the end. Whereas in interpreter, what happens is we are scanning line by line, so errors would be shown line by line. So this can be advantages that you get to know the errors at the line where they are. So you get to know the errors in the same line, and once you resolve them, then you move ahead. The main advantage of compiler is its execution time. So since it's scanning everything in one go, the time that it takes is less. Whereas interpreter, since it's scanning line by line, the slow execution would be there. So it's preferred less because it's slow. So Python is an interpreted language. There's no separate compilation and execution steps like we have in C or C++. So what do? You directly run the program from the source code. Another important feature of Python is it's simple. The philosophy is simplicity is the best. And it's closer to English language. The syntax is very simple. It's easy to learn, and emphasis is on the solution rather than the syntax. So you have to write very small code for a task which can be done with lot of lines in C++ or Java. In Python, you can do it in in small line in small number of lines. Okay, we can definitely talk about the disadvantages as well. So slow speed of execution. Obviously, because it's an interpreted language, so it's slow. For C or C++ programmers, switching to Python can be irritating because it requires proper indentation of code. So you have to indent your code properly, otherwise it's going to give indentation errors. And certain variable names like sum are functions in Python. So if you write sum as a variable, it won't be accepted. So it's very difficult for C or C plus programmers to actually move from C or C plus plus to Python. It's not very difficult. It's just that they would find it a bit irritating and just hard for the first few days. So if you know C or C++, no need to worry. We are going to start from scratch, understand each and everything, and we are going to study together and start from Python basics, then go to NumPys, then Pandas, and so on. Okay? So let's move ahead. So I'm going to use a Google Colab. If you want, you can use Miniconda, Anaconda, or a Jupyter notebook locally. So, but I'll be using Google Colab, but it's up to you if you want to use Jupyter notebook. Let me name it as Python Basics. Okay. So, how do we print in Python? Printing in Python is very simple. You just write print, you call the print function and just write something. Hello. So we run the cell, and how do we run the cell? We do shift plus enter. To run the cell, you're going to do shift plus enter. So if you see, it's connecting. It might take a few seconds. From connecting, it has become to initializing, and then we'll be finally able to get the response. So you see, you get the output as hello. So what do you do? Anything that you have to print. Print, hey. You write it and then you type shift plus enter. Now each of them is called a cell. So this is the cell that we have executed. This is the second cell that we execute. Okay. How do we write comments in Python? You do it by hash. This is a comment. So it's a comment and nothing would be printed. So in other programming languages like C, C++, and Java, you will need to declare the type of variables. But in Python, you don't need to do that. Just type in the variable, and when values will be given to it, it will automatically know whether the value given would be in int, float, character, or even a string. So you don't need to explicitly tell this is the type of the variable. For example, a is equals to 3. And then if you print a, and then you run the cell by shift plus enter, the value would be printed. So a is basically an integer. If you want to have a float number, b is equals to 4.3, and then you print b. Again, you can print it, you don't have to explicitly declare the type of the variable. Same with strings, c, k, and you print c. So again, it's printed. So far, what did we discuss? We discussed how do we print, then how do we write comments, and then how do we declare variables and print them. So these are some of the basics. As I told, we're going to start from scratch and slowly build on Python itself. So this course is for everyone who actually even does not know a bit of Python also, they can also attempt it. Okay. Now we talk about list. Whenever you have to write a text cell, not a code cell, what you do is you click here and you add a text cell, and to give a heading, you can put a hash, and this is going to give you a heading, list. So list is the most basic data structure in Python. You might have studied list in other languages also. List is a mutable data structure. That is, items can be added to the list after the list creation. It's like you're going to shop at the local market and make a list of some items, and later on you can just add them. And how do we add items to the list? It's basically by the append function. Okay, so let's actually create a list, say nums, like this. So this is an empty list that we are creating, and nums is basically the variable which stores the empty list. Now, how do we add elements to it? Nums dot append. You can append, let's say 1. Append spelling is wrong. It's APPEND. Okay. So then we see nums. So now your empty list has got one element, which is 1. Now let's append 2. Again, my bad, we have append. And then we see nums. Now it will have 1, 2. It's not that we can only add integers. We can add anything. Let me add a string, hi. And then you can see nums. So it would be 1, 2, and hi. Now, if you have to just see the first element, or the element which is at the 0th index. So since there's 0 indexing that is followed, this element is at the 0th index, this is at the first index, and this is at the second index. So if you want to see the element at 0th index, you just do nums of 0. And if you want to see the third element that is at the position 2, index 2, then you just write nums 2. Okay, so this is all about the lists. We can also do something like this. That is, this is basically, you start from the 0th index. You start from the 0th index and you go till the index 2 excluding 2. So you start from 0th index and you go till here, but you don't go till the second index. So basically this index is included and this index is excluded. So you start from the 0th index, you go till the second index, but you don't take the second index. So it's 0, it's 1 and 2 that will be added. If you go till 0 to 3, then that means you take the 0th index, the first index, and the second index. like this. If you do like this, we still get 1, 2, and high. Okay. Now, let's see how do we take the input. For example, I need to take the name as the input. So what do we do is, in the variable name, I want to store whatever I'm taking as the input. And how do you take the input? You take the input by the input function. You say input, please, hey, please enter your name. And you'll be asked to enter the name. Let me say DM. And the input is taken. Now I can actually store this input. Whatever input is taken, I can store this in a variable. So what I do is, name is basically the variable that I use, and I take the input and store it in this variable name. So I do DM and press enter. And now if I try to see what is there in the name, it would be whatever I have entered, which is DM, right? So this is how we take inputs. Now let's write a program. Let me write this in bold. So what we are going to do is accept two integers and multiply them and return the result. Take two integers from the user and multiply them and return the multiplication. Okay, so first let's take the first number. Please enter the first number. Let's see. We have to enter the first number, say 2. And if you see, this will become a string. This will become a string. So let me say as A and then see the type of A. So it's a string, right? How do you see the type of any variable? You just say type of that particular variable. So it's a string. Now, I don't want it to be a string because I want to take two integers. I want to take two integers. So what I will do is, I am going to convert this input to a int. And how do I do it? By the int function. So now if you see, if you type 3 and press enter and you see the type of A, it's going to be int. You see the value of A, it's going to be 3, right? Now you do the same thing for the second integer, B. You take the input and convert it into an integer. Please enter the second number. So let's see, 5, let's say. So now your B would be 5. Now what you need to do is, you need to define C, which is A into B. And what do you have as C? C is 15, right? So we can write it in one cell. Like this. So 2, the next number is 4, and you get C as 2 into 4, but you have not printed it. So what you can probably do is, the last thing could be print C. Now let's run this again. So first number is say 6, the second number is 4, and you print the result, which is 24, 6 into 4. Okay, this is Very simple. So in this way, we understood how do we take the input, how do we take the input and convert it into integer, and then how do we multiply two variables here. Okay. So the next thing that we are going to do, we are going to understand if-else statement, something that you might have already uh, seen in C, C++. Everything here remains the same. The concept is the same, only the syntax is different. Okay. Now what do we do is if-else statement. So to write in bold, you just have to say bold. Okay. Now, let's say A is equals to 25. Okay. Now, we write the condition. If A is greater than 20, then you have to print the number is greater than 20. So how do we write this? We say if, then in the parenthesis we put the condition, then we put a semicolon, and then in the next line we write this. Okay, let's run this. Okay, since 25 is greater than 20, this is printed. But let's say if you don't give this space and then you try to run it, you're going to get indentation error, expected and indented block. So the catch is that you have to give proper indentation. So if you write the if statement, then you put the condition, then you put the put the colon, then after that in the next line you have to give a indentation. You will have to give a tab and then only write the thing that needs to be done, the statement that needs to be executed if the condition is true. Okay. Then let's move on to the else if condition. Here else if is written as elif. Okay. And now the condition could be if A is, let's say, greater than 15. Then what you're going to print, again, you have to put a colon. And then you have to print the number is greater than 15 but less than equals to equal to 20. So again, since A is 25, the number is you're writing it, the number is greater than 20. Let's say the number is 18. So if you see 18 is not greater than 20, so this is not executed. The first thing is not executed, and then it goes to the else condition. Is A, that is 18, greater than 15? Yes, it is. So you say the number is greater than 15 but less than 20. Let's say if it was 10. Would anything be executed? No, because this condition is also not true and this condition is also not true. For that, we can write the next condition. So else, now if you want to further write another condition, only one condition, then you can just have else. If you want to write more conditions, then you can have again elif like this, right? Let me write two conditions for you. Elif, right? A greater than 10. So then what you have to do is you have to print the number. Let me write consistently. The number is greater than 10 but less than equal to 15. And now you can just write else condition. If you further want to write more conditions, then you can have elif. But if you just want to write the last condition, you can write else. Else. The number is less than 10. So now if your number is going to be 11, if your number is going to be 11, this condition won't be executed because it's not greater than 20. It's not greater than 15. It's greater than 10. So this third condition would be executed. And here also you have to put a colon. The number is greater than 10 but less than equals to 15. And if you write 10 here, the number is less than equals to 10. Okay. So I hope the if-else statement is clear. Okay. Now, let's move ahead. Let's try to understand functions here in Python. So how do you define a function in Python? First of all, what is function? Function is a bunch of code that is intended to do a particular task in any language, right? And in Python, we use the keyword def to define a function. So how do we define a function? Let's say I want to just print hello and I want to define a function for that. So what I do is I write def, then I write the function name. So first, basically, this is the keyword. After that, I have to write the function name. So the function name is, let's say, say, or maybe say hello, like this. So I have said that the function name is hello. And then I have to put a colon. And then inside this function, whatever I want to do. So basically, there would be a bunch of lines that we want to execute whenever hello is called. So let's say print statement 1. And the next print is statement 2. Right? So this is basically the function that I have defined. The function name is hello, and whenever hello would be called, these two statements would be executed. When I run this cell, nothing happens because here we are just defining the function. We have not invoked it yet. We have not called it yet. So how do we call it? We call it by saying hello, like this. So statement 1 and statement 2, both are printed, right? If I again call hello here, again the same two statements will be executed, right? Okay, let me define. So this is basically a function which does not take any parameters. Let's say I am creating a function create a function which takes two parameters and returns the sum of the parameters, returns the sum of them or of the parameters. Okay, so I will define addition function. So def is the keyword, addition is the name of the function, and it's going to take two variables, a and b, right? And then what it will do is it is taking a and b and it is going to add them and then return whatever is the summation. Okay, and then if I call addition with two numbers, say 2 and 5, what do I get? I get 7. So what is this return doing? It is returning something from the function. So what is this addition function? It is a function which takes two parameters. It sums these two parameters and stores it in a variable c, and then it returns c. So if you do addition 2 comma 5, you're going to get a as 2, b as 5, then sum them up and return the sum. I can condense these two and write it in a single line. I don't need to declare C also. Not declare, but define C. I don't need to define C. I can just return A plus B. There won't be any change in the answer. I can do 2.1 and 5.4 also. Again, I'll get the answer, right? So this is the use of functions. So basically why functions are used in code, because this addition function can be reused again and again. If I want to do the addition of these two numbers, I can call this. If I need to do addition of some two other different numbers, I can still call this. So basically, functions are reusable code pieces which can be used anywhere. Okay. Now, let's talk about the main function. Okay, so let's define one. First of all, let's define one function, get integer. So this is called camel case. Basically, after get, we are writing integer, and since it's the new word, I am going to use I with the uppercase. So get integer, and what it is going to do is it is going to have result variable which is going to take a integer, enter integer, and I can return result. Now I can directly do this in one statement also. I don't need to have a variable defined for it. So what we can do is, instead of this, I can just write return int input of enter integer. So basically you take a input, you take the input, you say enter integer, you take the input, you convert it into int, and then you return that integer, right? Now I'll define another function which is called main. Define main, right? And you can say print main function started, right? Then what you do is in this function, you call get integer. You call the function get integer. So what you do is output is a variable which basically calls get integer. It does not have any parameters, so I call it without parameters here, and then you print output. Again, you don't need output variable. You can directly do print of get integer like this. Now what do? You say if name is equals to main. Then you call the main function. So every Python has its name defined. And if this is main, it implies that the module is being run standalone by the user, and we can do corresponding appropriate actions. So what happens is, before executing the code, Python interpreter reads the source file and defines few special variables, or you can say global variables. If the Python interpreter is running that module, that is, if the Python interpreter is running the source file as the main program, it sees the special name variable. It sees the special name variable, its name like this. So, as I was saying, before executing the code, Python interpreter is going to read the source file and define some global variables. If the Python interpreter is running that source file as the main program, it sets the special name variable to the value main, and we are just checking that. So if our program is running standalone, if the Python interpreter is running the source file as the main program, then what happens is it sets the special name variable to main. Since we are running it standalone, so basically our name variable will be given the value main, which is true here, right? And since this is true, then main would be invoked, and when main would be invoked, then it would print main function started, and then it's going to invoke get integer, right? Let's see. So enter integer. So first, what happens is, since we are running this standalone, if the Python interpreter is running the source file as the main program, as in our case, then what happens is it sets this name variable to main. And if this is true, then main will be called. And since main is called, first the statement that is printed is main function started, and then we are going to print get integer. So we go to get integer. Since we have to print get integer, we go to get integer function, and then we have to input a integer. So basically this would be returned. So get integer is going to return this. That is enter integer is printed, and I print the and I give an input which is 4, and this 4 will be returned, and that 4 will be then printed like this. Does that make sense? So what happens is, I'll again repeat. So if the Python interpreter is running the module as standalone, or it's running the source file as the main program, then what happens is the name variable will be given the value main. And since this is true in our case, then the main function will be called. In the main function, which is called, the first statement is main function started, which is printed. And then the second is print get integer. So get integer is another function which will be called. Now get integer is called, we go here. So here what happens is we have to first take a input, and then it will be converted to integer. So if you run this, first main function started is printed, then you have to input a integer, say 6, and then you press enter. And what happens is this 6 will be taken as it's taken as a string, then it's converted into int, and it's returned. So it's returned here. So instead of this, what will be there? 6, and then 6 will be printed. So we see this print 6 here. Okay. Okay, now let's move ahead. Let's move ahead to the range function. So the Python range function basically returns a sequence of numbers in the given range. The most common use of the range function is to iterate sequence using loops. So maybe let's first start off with loops. So how do we write a for loop? So we write for, we declare a variable, not declare, but we say that there is a variable I in range. Let's say 1 to 2 or 1 to 5. So basically what happens is, what's the syntax of range? Range basically will have start, stop, and step. Let me write it somewhere. It can have range, can have three parameters: start, stop, and step. Okay. So what is this start? Start is actually optional. It basically tells the start value of the sequence. It tells the start value of the sequence. So basically our loop is going to start from 1. What is stop? Stop is not optional. It's mandatory, and it gives us the next value after the end value of the sequence. So basically stop won't be included. It gives us the next value after the end value of the sequence. So if you are doing I in the range 1 to 5, then 1 will be printed, 1 will be like I will be taking the value 1, I will be taking the value 2, it will be taking the value 3, 4, but it will not take the value 5, because stop is basically the next value after the end value. The end value is 4 and the next value is 5. So I is going to go from 1 to 4. And then we have step also. Step is also optional. Only the thing that's mandatory is stop. So step is optional, and it basically denotes the difference between any two numbers in the sequence. We are going to understand range with all the different versions, where there's only stop, where there's start and stop, where there's start, stop, and step. We are going to see this. Okay. So first we write for I in the range 1 to 5. And then we just print I. So this is how we write the for loop. So we have for, then we have a variable name I, and I will be in the range 1 to 5. That is, I can take the values 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Why it's not taking 5? Because stop basically tells us the next value after the end value of the sequence. Okay? Now here I have not defined step, so step by default will be 1, right? So what will this print? 1, 2, 3, 4. And print automatically has a end after it. So when you are printing something, then automatically you get a end line there. Okay. Now, if I just write for I in the range 10, I just write like this. And then I just print I. So by default, the start would be 1 or 0. What do you think? By default, what would be the start? The start by default is going to be 0. So we'll have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is basically the stop. Stop is compulsory. If you're just writing one parameter, then that's actually stop. So by default, start is going to be 0 and the stop is going to be 10 and the end value would be 9 since the stop is 10, right? Now, let's move ahead. For I in the range, let me write 2 to 10 and then maybe print I. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, if I put the third parameter was step. Let me put the third parameter also here, which is 2. So first what will happen? 2 will be printed, then 2 would be like 2 is printed, then we have steps of 2. So first 2 is printed, then what will be printed? 2 plus 2, 4. Then what will be printed? 4 plus 2, 6. Then what will be printed? 6 plus 2, 8. And then what should be there? 8 plus 2, 10. But 10 cannot be included. So it's not included. So that's why we just have 2, 4, 6, 8. If I have steps of 3, then what will be printed? We start off with 2. Then we take a step of 3, which is 5. Then we take a step of 3, which is 8. So we'll have 2, 5, 8. We can't have 11. If I take steps of 4, we have 2, 6. That's it. We can't have 10. So when the user is calling range with 3 arguments, the user can choose not only where the series of numbers will start and stop, but also how big the differences will be between the one number and the next, right? If the user doesn't provide a step, then automatically the step is 1. For example, here, 1 comma 5. The start was 1, the stop was 5. There was no step. So by default, the step is going to be 1. So 1 is printed, then the next number will be 1 plus 1, 2. Then 2 is printed, then the number is 2 plus 1, which is 3. So by default, the step is going to be 1. Okay. Now, for I, let's say in range, and I give 3.3. And let's say just I print I. Then what's going to happen? What would be printed? Will I get some error or there's going to be something that's going to be printed? So if you see this, since 3.3 is float, float cannot be interpreted as an integer, so I get an error. So Python range function does not support the float numbers. That is, user cannot use floating point or non-integer numbers in any of its arguments. We can only use integer numbers, right? Okay, so we have understood the basics of Python. We've understood loops, we've understood range, we've understood if-else condition. We know how to take inputs. So now we are going to do a small task where what we do is make a basic calculator. So what you do is take two integers and take two integers to perform a operation. Take one integer to figure out which operation needs to be performed. To identify which operation to perform. So what do you do is you take two integers, basically for whom you have to perform the operation, and then you take one integer to identify which operation needs to be performed. For example, you can take two integers a and b, and you need to perform the operation, but you also need to know whether you need to perform a plus b or a minus b or a into b or a divided by b, right? So take a particular integer, or you can take a symbol also, anything, or you can take a string also, and then based on that input, figure out what needs to be performed, what needs to be done with those two operations. And then once you know which operation needs to be performed, just print that answer. If you need to perform addition, then print a plus b. So what we can do is we can take an integer to find out which operation needs to be performed. So if we have 1, then we have to perform addition. If we get a 2 from the user, we have to perform subtraction. If we get 3, we have to do multiplication. And if we get 4, we have to do division. Right? So we can do this, right? Let's see. What do we do? First, we can take two integers. So a is equals to int input, enter first number, b is int input, enter second number, and then what you have to do is take the third integer also. So first you'll say int input, enter 1 for addition, 2 for subtraction, 3 for multiplication, and 4 for division. Now you're saying that you need to enter 1, 2, 3, 4. Some users would be like, they won't enter 1, 2, 3, 4. They might enter 5 also. So you have to handle that as well, right? So first we have taken three inputs, A, B, and C. Now we have to first write the condition. If C is equals to 1, so we are checking if it's equals to 1. If C is equals to 1, then you have to print A plus B, right? Else if, that is elif, if C is equals to 2, you have to print A minus B. Else if, elif, C is equals to 3, then what do you have to print? You have to print A into B. Put a colon as well here. Else C is equals to 4, then you have to print A by B. So let's see. Needs to be a colon. So don't forget these small issues. Else. So line 10 is invalid. What is invalid here? Can you tell me? What's wrong? This also has to be a condition. You cannot have a condition with else. So since there is a condition, you'll have to write elif. A condition is associated with elif or if, not with else. So enter the first number, let's say 2. Enter the second number, let's say 3. Enter 1 for addition, 2 for subtraction, 3 for multiplication, and 4 for division. Let's say I want to add. So you get a plus b, which is 2 plus 3, which is 5. Now, I am a notorious user and I'll give the integers 2, then I'll give 3, and then I'll give 5. I won't get anything because I haven't written what happens if c is not equals to 1, not equals to 2, not equals to 3, not equals to 4. So in that case, what needs to be done is now I'll write the else condition. So elif or if are associated with conditions, else does not have a condition. So else I will print, sorry, wrong input. Now I'll see. So I give the first number as 3, the second number as 5, and let me say C is also 5. Sorry, wrong input, right? Now let's see. So enter first number, let's say 5, enter second number, let's say 0. And now let's say I perform division. Then let's see what happens. We get an error, 0 division error, because we are trying to do a number divided by 0, which is not possible. So when we are trying to do division, we also have to check whether b is 0 or not. If it is 0, then I'll say, sorry, wrong, wrong value of b. And if not, then you can do a by b. Because if we have b as 0, then we are going to get an error, 0 division error. Because a by 0 is not possible, right? It gives a 0 division error. So here I'll again check the condition. If b is equals to 0, print division is not possible. Right, sorry also. Sorry, division is not possible. Check with another value of, check with other inputs or check with other numbers. And if this is not the case, then what do you do is, else you do print a by b. Now enter first number, let's say 6. Enter second number, say 0. And now I have to perform division. Sorry, division is not possible. Check with other numbers. So now this case is also handled. Now let's say if I do like this, I don't provide the proper indentation, then I'm going to get indentation error, right? So again, let's say enter first number, let's enter 4.2. Then we directly get the error. We are expected to have an integer, but this is not an integer. So invalid literal. So this is also going to give us an error. Now let's probably give something which actually can be done. Let's say 5 and the second number is 6. And now we need to do the multiplication. And we get the answer, which is 35 into 6, right? So this is kind of helping us understand all the concepts that we did today. If else, it's helping us with int, how do we take ints, and also helping us to play with variables. Okay, so this is our basic calculator that we have. There can be a lot of modifications to it, but I'll leave it to you to play around with this. Okay, so what did we cover today? Let's revise very quickly. Let's go to the slides. So Python is a high level language. It's very popular because it's used in almost all of the industries right now, in web development, in machine learning, in software industry, everywhere. So some of the advantages of Python are that it's a high level language and it's very easy. It follows the philosophy that simplicity is the best. It's used by almost tech giant companies. And the biggest strength of it is that it has huge collection of standard libraries. The one that we are going to use in this course is going to be sklearn. So what we'll do is we'll say to sklearn, hey, this is the model that I want to build. And sklearn will build the model for you. You don't have to write all the code for it. So there are standard libraries for almost all things in Python. And Python also allows programming to be done in object-oriented programming, in procedural paradigms, and so on. The emphasis is on code readability and shorter codes. So if you have a task to perform, let's say C or C++ or Java is taking 20 lines, Python can probably do it in lesser number of lines. So here we have to write fewer lines when compared to other popular languages like C++ or Java. And here emphasis is on code readability. Indentation is a must. You saw, if you don't indent, then you're going to get indentation error. And the philosophy, as we discussed, simplicity is the best. Now, Python is an interpreted language. That is, it translates the program one statement at a time. And because it's an interpreted language, it's a bit slow as compared to others, but it's going to scan one line at a time and errors would be shown line by line. And it's simple, it's easy to learn, anyone can learn it. Obviously, those who have already learned C, C++, or Java, they might find it a bit difficult, but then once you get a grasp of it, it's very simple and it's very, very close to English. Obviously, the cons are that it's slow because it's an interpreted language, and switching to Python might be a bit irritating because indentation is a must here, and certain variables like sum, which we normally use in C, C++, they cannot be used here. Then we went to the coding part. And what did we do there? So we started off with the print statements. We know how we write a comment also in Python. Then we understood that how do we declare variables? Here we don't need to declare the variable type. Why don't we need to declare the variable type? Because here, based on the value, the variable type would be defined. Now, we next went to the next data structure, which is list, and we understood that it's a mutable data structure where things could be appended, and they could be appended using the function append. Then we understood how we take input. How do we take input in Python? And we can take input like this. You write something and then you can just say input, and you'll be able to take some input. Now, this input is basically in string. This input is in string. To convert it into integer, you'll have to write int. You'll have to call int. Now, once you take some integers, you can perform various operations on them, multiplication, division, and so on. Then we have the if-else statement. So with if, you put a condition and then you put a colon. Then if you have to write further conditions, then you write elif. Again, elif, condition, and then a colon. Then again, elif, condition, and a colon. And the last would be else, which does not have a condition with it. How do you define functions? Function is basically a bunch of code that is intended to do a particular task, right? So you first write the keyword def, and then you give the function name, you put the parenthesis. Here you can provide the parameters if there are any. If there are no parameters, then that's fine. And then you tell what needs to be inside the function. Then we discussed about the variable name. This is something very important that we discussed. So before executing code, Python interpreter reads the source file and it defines a few special variables like the global variables. And if the Python interpreter is running the source file as the main program, then the name variable will be given the value main. And since the Python interpreter here is running standalone and it's running the source file is the main program. So here name is given the value main, and that's why our main function would be invoked, which would further call the get integer function. Then we discussed about range. So range functions, the range function actually returns a sequence of numbers in a given range, and it can have three things: start, stop, and step. Start is basically the start value of the sequence, stop is the next value after end value of the sequence, and step is going to basically denote the difference between any two numbers in the sequence. And range cannot take float as the parameters. And then we created a basic calculator. So that's all for this class. In the next class, we are going to do other topics on Python. We are going to learn a few Python libraries. So thank you, everyone.